Hello, I'm Chris Edgar, and welcome to the Blackmagic Collective post-production sound panel about Foley and sound editing and dialogue editing and all the other good stuff about post-production sound. I am a composer and producer. The latest feature I worked on, Playing with Beethoven, which actually was worked on as well by two of our guests, will be in theaters this November. So that's pretty exciting, the fact that these guests are on and the fact that the movie is coming out. Welcome to everybody who is here. Please let us know what you are up to in the world of indie filmmaking or non-indie filmmaking, as the case may be. Where are you here from? You can let us know in the comments box, whether you're tuning in on Facebook or YouTube or some other platform that this is on that I'm not yet aware of. What is Blackmagic Collective? We are a collective of film and TV artists and crew. We meet regularly on the business and craft of filmmaking with education events that focus largely on the tech and gear-headed side. Membership is free. If you join Blackmagic Collective now, you will be eligible to win a seat of Davinci Resolve, which is the editing suite. There's the editing and much more made by Blackmagic Design, which is pretty awesome. I also want to let you know that submissions are now open for the Blackmagic Collective Film Festival. We take one film each month to showcase, and a few others will also move forward to the semifinals. 10 of the finalists will screen at our big year-end event in November, and there's a lot of gear and cash prizes available there. Special thank you to our sponsor, Blackmagic Design. They love filmmakers, and they're the reason why we get to do what we do at no cost to filmmakers. And like I said, they're giving away a seat of Davinci Resolve, which you really don't want to miss. And that'll be to one of the people in attendance today, and we'll actually announce the winner at the very end of this panel. If you have any questions for the panelists that I'm about to introduce, please put them in the Q&A box. They'll try to answer as many questions along the way as we can. And without further ado, let's introduce our guests. The first one that I'll introduce is going to be Diana Cha. Do we have Diana? Okay, there we go. Hello. Hi, Diana. Diana is a sound editor, and she's got a dog. A sound editor, designer, and mixer. Best known as the sound supervisor on the musical feature The Girl Who Left Home, sound designer for the Audible Originals, Hello Sunshine audiobook, The Baddest Bitch in the Room. Diana currently leads Cogito Audio Productions, whose clients have included Apple, Lifetime, Hallmark, Com, E, L, and Eureka. Diana, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here.
And let's introduce our next guest, David Schatanoff. David is a multi-industry producer. He navigates the worlds of film and television, but also the scoring and music industries. His current projects include the popular second season of the digital series L.A. Macabre, the feature film Playing with Beethoven, and the nonfiction series Open America with Joel Bryant. He began his career in the film and television industry in 1998, working in post-production for the major studios, and has worked with high-profile clientele, supervising post-production operations at 20th Century Fox and at Sony Pictures. So thank you for being here, David.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, we have Bruce Stubblefield, who has been a dialogue editor, sound supervisor, and supervising sound editor on a very extensive catalog of well-known films, such as Dances with Films. Sorry, that's the name of the festival that I was just at. Dances with Wolves. It was the first Dances with. It introduced the whole concept of dancing with things, with the movie with Kevin Costner, Pulp Fiction, Speed, Twister, and many more. So many of the films that you know and love, Bruce worked on. Welcome, Bruce.
Howdy.
And with that, I think I'll just get right into the questions. A lot of the people here are independent filmmakers from every aspect of independent film production, whether it's camera or sound or editing and so forth. And they are interested to know, often as indie filmmakers are, how do you get professional-looking projects done on an indie budget? So I think I would lead off by asking, what would be your recommendations, if you have recommendations you have for getting professional quality post-production sound if you have to work with a limited budget? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I have one first thought, which is the best way to get good sound in post is to get it in production. meaning hire a mixer who you know is good, and especially one who knows how to mount and use lavs. Because on an indie budget, you'll be lucky if you get a boom anywhere, and you'll be lucky if it sounds like anything. But you're always going to be somewhere where you're going to get a lav and end up using it because it'll be the only thing that's useful. 8 out of 10 times. And if the worse the production sound is, it's not magic, and we don't have magic tools that fix everything, no matter what they try to sell you. We fix some things, but there's a clarity and an openness to well-recorded sound that you almost never hear in independent films because it requires expensive microphones and quiet places. But the closer you can get to it, the better off you'll be.
Yeah, making sure that you get good sound on set and listening to the take afterwards. I mean, despite how quickly you need to progress when you're on an indie set. I mean, I think a lot of filmmakers don't realize how much money you can save in post based on that. How about Diana and David? Is that consistent with? I know, David, you've done sound mixing as well as post sound.
Yeah, it's Bruce nailed it right there. And I was the production mixer on Playing with Beethoven, so I hope some of the stuff I recorded on set didn't make his life too hard in post-production editorial land. So yeah, it all starts at the beginning of the process. Bring your audio people in early so that they can plan the best that they can in production to get you the best possible recorded dialogue and environments and room tone, so that life is so much easier in post-production for your editor, your re-recording mixer, and your recordist. So it really comes down. It's the same way you would treat the camera team, where you have a plan to get into production. Your production, you light it, you shoot it, and then when you get into post, your colorist has a plan to get the images solid. Your editorial team has a plan to use the footage that you captured to create these sequences. It's the same idea. Treat your sound team how you would your camera team, and give them as much planning and preparation so that the final product is the best it can be.
And I get the sense that maybe in your experience that doesn't happen as much as it should. Like the camera team gets a little bit more focus in the pre-production than the
Sure. I mean, yeah, that's when it comes down to it, the moving picture is much more fascinating to people, than trying to figure out how to get audio clean and understood and heard in the final product. So over the last 20 plus years of my career, it's why I have a career. Is people have always thought of post-production sound as it's an afterthought for them. So yeah.
And also the post-production sound is everybody thinks they can stick a microphone up somewhere and record the sound. And they really don't respect it, or they don't think about it. They respect it, but they don't think about it. And whereas with something like music or camera work, they really don't understand it at all, and it's kind of magic to them. And so they really respect composers and DPs who can kind of intimidate them into getting a better quality out of something. So it's a little harder with post-production sound.
Yeah,
but that's life.
To add to what they were saying, I agree with it. I've also done some recording on set as well, and for me, one of the things that I noticed was sometimes because it's so easy to just focus on camera. Like sometimes you can just get shooed off set, like sounds get away, and then they're like, okay, where's sound now? And they don't even give you any time to set up or anything. And I'm not saying all sets do this, but I feel like it's so easy to dismiss sound and not give the sound team, assuming there's a team, time to really get coordinated. And sometimes they'll be like 5 minutes till the next shot, and you have to lav like 8 people, and that's just not gonna happen. So for me, I think it's just give your sound team the time that other people get, like PD. They always get time to set up, art or on top of that. And just respecting the time, I think, is super important.
Yeah. Do you find yourself talking to directors about this during pre-production, like, hey, the sound has got to get the attention that it needs?
Well, I wish they'd talk to us during pre-production.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah, I just wonder if it requires people to be like, if it requires sound people to be kind of proactive, like if that's a recommendation you would make, to go and talk to the director and say, hey, we're going to need to allocate some time here to sound on set, and more than usually it happens in my experience.
Yeah, of course.
Mm.
Of course. If
Yeah.
you can talk to them, great.
Yeah.
There are things you can do that don't take time or don't take a lot of time.
Mm.
And those are the things they'll let you do. That they, if you didn't bring them up, they might not even know them. I can't think of a great example right now, but if it's going to cost the production time, you probably won't get to do it.
Yeah.
You know, because it's twice as bad or 10 times as bad as a show when, because no one's getting paid if it's a little indie film, or if they're getting paid, you know, it's not very much. And so really everything is about getting it done faster than any other thing. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I take it that one of the other strategies for minimizing expense would be to lean on sampled or library sounds as opposed to custom recording of sound, or is that your experience too?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the indie films is they have so little money, if they have any money, that you don't have time to go out and record anything. I mean, 99% of anything that's in even, well, in television and indie films is either Foley or library. And there's brilliant stuff out there. You know, there's not that, like, you're not sacrificing. There's the best recordists in the world that put out hundreds of libraries by this time, and you're not going to do better than those guys. So just because you think it might have appeared somewhere, there's nothing special about going out and sticking a microphone up somewhere and praying. These guys, you know, put the incredible effort into these libraries. And so I wouldn't be afraid to use them. You know, I mean, you don't want to use the same gunshot every time, but that's about, you know, how do you edit gunshots and how many shots do you use and that sort of thing. That's not about going out and recording it yourself, in my humble opinion. You know, I don't know where you're going with the conversation, but one thing that I would say to identify as a filmmaker very early on is how are you going to be posting the show? If you're going to do it all yourself, you're probably going to use Premiere or something like that. Maybe you'll use Avid if you're lucky. If you're going to give it to anybody else to do anything, you have a lot of conversations to have with your DP and your sound mixer and your DIT guy and anybody involved in the chain of getting material to people downstream. Because what we get 9 times out of 10, if we even, you know, if they didn't record it on a little a TAC 2-track with a, you know, one of those things you hold up like a phone, if they didn't record it that way, which half the time they do, you get no metadata. And metadata is everyone's friend. And if you're using Premiere, you have to have conversations with people. I don't know how to do it because thank God in my business, we have assistants and I bob off anything I can on them, especially technical work like that. But Premiere is very, very downstream post unfriendly. It's very friendly within itself. And I think a lot of people love it for that. But if you're gonna give the sound to someone else to do, they're gonna do it in Pro Tools. And if you know, and same for the visual aspects. And if you don't have at least scene and take and some basic information, it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for the dialogue guy, which is going to be 75 or 90% of your sound in an indie film. It's very difficult for the dialogue guy to get the information he needs just to fix something. So communication and get the information about how to. They don't. Most people using Premiere and even, you know, young editors, they don't really know how to. They don't know how to set the settings. It's just a matter of buttons to push when you ingest the material into the whatever you're ingesting it into. One button will give everybody what they want, and another will deny everybody what they want. I mean, probably more than one button, but you get the idea. You got to talk to people.
Yeah. Yeah. Why don't we take a question from the audience here, which is, this is from Jayasri M. Hart. What are the elements of sound design beyond adjusting volume and pan of dialogue, FX, and music? For me, for example, EQ is to get rid of noise and limiters avoid digital overload. Does anyone want to weigh in on this one?
Obviously not.
In editorial, I'm usually not thinking about EQ. All that stuff I leave to re-recording mixers. If you're lucky enough to have a post-production team that's departmentalized, and you have people working in their specific areas. In audio editorial, I'm not worrying about EQing something. I'm worrying about putting the pieces together that fit what I'm seeing on screen. Especially when it comes to sound effects. Do I have footsteps where there need to be footsteps? Is there clothing rustle where there needs to be clothing rustle? And finding those elements that may have not translated well from production audio and filling out that sound field in post-production. So I'm not too worried about the different aspects of things that a re-recording mixer may be focused on.
Yeah.
I'm with David completely, because it's sort of, that's either what we call it the professional, or some people would call it the old-fashioned fogey way of doing it, which is, we each have our in the old days, sound editors didn't do anything to the sound except chop it up and a few other things and clean it. Now there's and then give it to the mixer and they did everything with it. And nowadays it's much more blurred than that. And anybody working on these indie films, you probably are going to have to worry about it if you'd have no one helping you. So I'd say don't make an indie film until you have people to help you who know what they're doing. Because if you have someone to help you with sound, they're going to know so much more about it that they're going to be the ones who will do it well. You can get a few things done in the picture editing programs, but even if you have a Pro Tools, and even if you have a bunch of cracked programs to go with it, no one here uses cracked programs, by the way. We all pay for all our programs, just saying that. Even if you have a bunch of programs, you don't know how to use them. And even if you know how to use them, you don't know how to listen. It takes, although no one appreciates what we do, it takes decades to really learn to hear. And that's what someone brings to it. They bring ears to it. They don't bring knowing how to use a box or that. Yes, they bring that. But what they bring is they know what they're hearing. So get someone to help you. It's not an easy answer, because when you're making these little indie things, nobody will help you. But that's the difference between filmmakers and non-filmmakers. It's real easy to stick up a digital thing nowadays so everybody thinks they're a filmmaker. But it takes a lot of collaboration, a lot of discussion, and knowing people, and you really ought to get to know them before you try to go too far. It'll make everyone's life easier if you do.
Yeah, definitely. And having people you can work with on a recurring basis is such a gold. Diana, I know that you have a lot of involvement in sound design.
Yeah. So the question was to the elements of sound design beyond adjusting volume and pan. I guess delays and like echoey sounds, like in horror movies, like you'd hear like a voice, like a creepy ghost voice, like, oh, save me. And, you want to, sometimes you want to think about what kind of, how you want it to sound like in the room, if it's, spinning, things like that. Obviously, the re-recording mixer is the one who gets to decide where everything goes. But I guess even for me, when I just do the sound design and I have to pass it off to someone else, I'll just do my own temp, mix to give them an idea of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And then they can go wild with it after. But I'm not like baking in too many of the effects, because otherwise I'm going to tie the re-recording mixer's hands.
Yeah.
But so like things like that, like more creative. Sometimes you'll see things like somebody says something and it's like a cliffhanger, and then their voice like echoes into the black screen, things like that. But beyond that, I think the biggest thing is just, yeah, taking out all the nasty bits and cleaning things up so it's nice and tidy before thinking about extra effects.
So in terms of taking out the naughty bits or the nasty bits, sorry, that's English. You want to do what you can with it, but now with all these boxes that people think they know how to work, if you do too much to it, you'll just wreck it, and it'll sound like a cross between a radio show and a CB broadcast, and everything will be clipped and compressed and squashed, and so. But again, that depends on whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're giving it to someone. If you're giving it to someone, a simple thing I can tell you to do is when you're editing your picture, edit your sound intelligently. And all that means is keep the dialogue on one set of tracks, keep the sound effects on another set of tracks, and keep the music on another set of tracks. That may sound dopey simple, but you make stuff we see. So if you keep it separate, and again, worry about interfacing and call a good assistant and ask them how to interface. But just keeping things separate. It sounds so dumb, but anyone who helps you will appreciate that. And then you'll appreciate it too as you're going through your show and suddenly you have 80 tracks. You'll know a little bit more about what you have.
Yeah.
100%. Sometimes I'll get like an OMF where like the 2-track of the music, it's completely split and everything's all over the place. I'm like, how did this even happen? Where did everything go? And then I just send it back. I'm like, hey, fix it and send it back to me because this is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. I know sometimes I've gotten tracks where the music and the dialogue are on the same track and like, well, can't you just take the music out no, I need you to take the music out and then you send it, and then I put the music in, then I send you a separate music. So yeah, sometimes it requires, in the indie business, it requires a little bit of explanation sometimes that I have to do.
I'm wondering if, I don't know who's watching this, but we're talking about basically helping other people help you, and we may be a lot of people watching who just simply are not going to have the resources to have anybody help them, and they're really going to do it all themselves. In that case, I don't know if people want that kind of information. It's pretty boring, and we could dive into it, but I don't know who needs what. So maybe we should, if there's an answer to that question.
I think if you are one-man banding the post-audio process, I do think you should, make sure that you're editing your audio first and then saving all your EQ, all that good stuff for later, so that you're not putting yourself into you're not backing yourself into any corners. Like Diana said, you don't want to tie the re-recording mixer's hands when they get to that point in the process. So focus on editorial first of your dialogue, of your sound effects and your music, and then afterward worry about all your panning, your reverbs, the fun creative stuff that you might have with an echoing voice or building explosions or whatever your project is about. Editorial first and then all the fun stuff in re-recording.
Plus, if you may think you're going to do it all yourself, but if the thing ends up being any good, someone else will start touching it. Yeah. And so you may as well do some of these things, no matter who you think is going to deal with it. And you should hope it's good enough someone else wants to touch it. So, and I haven't read them, but I know there's tons of books out there about post-production. I know there's books about dialogue editing effects. So you probably ought to, they can't be that bad. So I'd read them. And because there's probably a lot of great information in them, even if they, everybody thinks they're the best editor in the world, first of all, and they'll criticize sources of information like this because that's not how I do it. You're an idiot. But really, there's many ways to do everything, and I've yet to hear a rule that is written in a law that I could get punished for in sound. So it's what can you do that will make it sound good, and anyway, anything goes.
Yeah.
So I guess read up on it, but it's time consuming.
And speaking of figuring out what people need, we have a question from Woke Films. This is very specifically about ADR. We're currently shooting a feature film here in Florida using a Rode NTG2 wired to my BMP CC 4K. We are getting less than perfect audio. Any tools or resources you can recommend for ADR?
I guess he's meaning after he's getting crappy sound and he knows it, and he knows he's going to have to loop it.
Yeah, that looks right.
Well, we're all stumped. That's very funny.
Hey, the first
sorry.
indie film that I did, we didn't get great sound in production, and when it came to post, I think we wound up doing about 70 to 80% ADR for the entirety of the film was ADR. And what we did was I have Pro Tools at home, which is nice. So we just shot up a mic here in my place because it was a no budget indie feature. And then we just went scene by scene. We did an Excel spreadsheet and, listed all of our loops for all the actors, brought them in, recorded what we needed to record. And then we at least had cleaner takes than the production audio. And then it was just a matter of clearing out the room tone from my little studio here and trying to fit that dialogue in to match whatever was in production. So, you can take that Rode microphone that you're using, set it up at home, record your loops to picture, and try and get those. This would be the cheapest way to do it. Try and get that ADR to match your production lip flap, and then just pull it into your editing system, whatever you're using, and try and clean it up to those clips and, list your best takes, line them up, and then hopefully that works for you.
Yeah. Again, it's as with the questions are always technical, but the question really isn't so technical. It's artistic. And the reason people hate ADR is because the performance always degrades, and they never get in their recording studio what they got on the set. So if you know somebody who can help you, they're going to have a setup and they can take care of it. If you don't know anybody, as David says, you can easily set up a microphone sitting right next to we get editors, picture editors who do this all the time, and it ends up in the movie. They'll put up a mic next to where they're cutting, and they never get it better than that. And so you can, and I'd say from a do-it-yourself point of view, I would figure out how to set up a loop system on a Pro Tools or whatever you have that will play back the line and then leave a space for someone to talk in a rhythm. It's why we call it looping, because in the old days it was loops. It was loops of film on projectors, and they would go. There wasn't none of this beep 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 talk stuff. They put up a loop, and Humphrey Bogart would say, "Here's looking at you, kid," and we'd have so it would go, "Here's looking at you, kid," on the work track, the guide track, and he'd just say, "Here's looking at you, kid," right after it, and 75% of the time it's better than what we do now. And often in looping, you end up doing it that way because the actors, it's a very artificial process. But when you make it a repetition, it just becomes all it needs to be, which is a repetition of the words with the emotion. So you set up you set it up. It's technical, but you set up like 10 times in a row with 10 spaces in between, a little longer than that, so the actor will get into a rhythm. He'll hear it, he'll say it, he'll hear it, he'll say it. He doesn't even have to look at the screen. Then you can take it down and when you like one and look at the screen against it. But if you try to make the actor look at the screen, you'll just in a non-professional situation, you're going to probably destroy the performance. So I recommend, not for me, I'm not going to do it, but if you're a do-it-yourself, it works remarkably well. It's very time-consuming, giant pain in the ass, and but it does work.
To add to that, I would recommend using the same mic that you used on set just to maintain a level of consistency in terms of the audio quality. I mean, I think is this BMPCC, it's a camera, right? So is it just the only, like, I guess I don't really have context for this, but the camera is just, that's the mic and that's it. Like, so you're not, I guess you're not really getting the mic close enough to the actor.
Yeah, is there a boom? Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I'm a little confused about that, but definitely whatever is your main mic, you know, if you're doing ADR, use that mic to record the ADR. And if they have lavs, hopefully they have lavs, clip one of those on there too, just so the editor, or if you have options to choose which mic that you want to use for that particular spot.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of thinking out loud that you must have the mic on a boom, but you may not have that. But if you can't, you know, if you're, again, a do it yourself, go get a boom. Go get a pole from the Home Depot that they use for extendable. I mean, if you can't, you know, because you can't afford anything when you're making these. It's not going to be pretty, but if you can get a microphone over somebody's head 2 feet away, as opposed to the camera 10 feet away or 8 feet away or even 6 feet away, you can at least do one lav, because you get 2 channels in most of these, and many channels in some of these cameras. You can run a lav into your camera too, even if you're just recording to camera. Red cameras have 4 channels at least, but I mean, if you have a red, you're not worrying about what we're talking about.
Yeah, and speaking of that issue of having money or no money, as the case may be in the context of an indie film, I've heard that post sound is generally about, like, a rule of thumb is that it's about 5% of the budget of the film. Does that sound like a decent rule of thumb to you, or is it really something that needs to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis?
Well, the more expensive the film, the higher it should be, up to 50%, in my opinion. I should say, out of $100 million film, I believe we should get 50% of that. Okay, well, that's obviously stupid. Okay, that's a joke. But in the old days, it used to be 10%, and I think that included music, but it may not have included the composer's fee.
Yeah. Now
it's whatever you can get. You know, I mean, David probably is the best witness on this, since you do a lot of management.
Yeah, it's, you know, it really does come down to project to project. And, you know, back in there's a sliding scale that we used in the Producers Guild. And I think it's, if you're looking at like $100,000 film, that 50K of that would go to all of post. So within that 50K, you have your picture, editorial, color correction, all your deliverables, and then a little portion of that would be for the sound team for editorial and re-recording mixing. So, you know, if you have money to do it, you should, you know, look at definitely at least a production mixer and a boom operator in production, and then in post-production at least an editor and a re-recording mixer, which sometimes winds up being the same person. But yeah, it's a project to project thing. You want to try and save as much money as you can for posts, where, you know, where you're finishing. You don't want to blow all of that budget in production on big set pieces and all that stuff. So you can, but be prepared to start begging for money from investors or from crowdfunding when you get to post production.
Were you going to say something, Diana?
Oh no, I agree with all that.
Yeah.
Keep it going.
Yeah. Why don't we get to another question from David Kuntz? Beyond effects for things happening on screen level of design, are there any tips for having richer sound designs? I struggle with things that aren't literally on screen but add greatly to the feel. I guess maybe that refers to sort of ambient sound, like traffic noise or noise of the ocean, or whatever kind of location that you're in.
Well, I mean, I'd say one of the things, obviously there's different categories of things. There's on-screen effects, off-screen effects, backgrounds. One thing you can do that it is probably will yield a lot is a few good backgrounds, especially if you have a show, especially some room tones, in addition to all the bugs and birds and traffic, and but just small amounts of fill sound, because again, usually these pictures are dialogue pictures, and either 2 or 3 traffics that you can blend, 2 or 3 room tones that you can blend, and then, you know, anything goes really. If there's what does the world consist of? You know, think about, look around you. There's, like I said, there's tones, and there's bugs, and there's birds, and there's machines. And, you know, if it's a fantasy film, there's your imagination, anything goes. And get somebody with a good imagination to help you. Because if you have a fantasy film, you don't want to try to do those effects yourself. But just think about what's around you, and anything you can think of, that sound has been recorded, and you'll be able to get it out of a library, or you can go record it yourself. I don't know if that's an answer.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. To add to that, I would say, like, think about your intent. Like, what are you trying to achieve and why? And then you can kind of think about like what you want to do next. So for example, like a horror movie, like you're going into a house and it's, you know, it's like, why are you going to the house? Like you might get killed. So the house itself could be a character where it could be scary. So how do you want to convey that? Maybe some creaking noises, maybe some wind going through the windows, things like that. Or let's say it's like a quiet scene where someone's just having a conversation with someone and it's awkward. Maybe they're breaking up or something, and they're just looking at each other and they can't, they don't know what to say. Maybe a chair creak.
Yeah.
You know, like little things to add to the awkwardness. Like, so why are you doing it? Because it's awkward. So how are you going to add to the awkwardness? I would say think about things like that, or just layering even. You know, like maybe there's like one obvious sound, like you know, they say like even punches aren't really punches anyway, but you know, there's like when you punch somebody, like in the movies anyway, it's not like real life, but this is hyper realism. But you know, like the tooth cracks, or like there's like that slapping noise and on top of the actual thud, things like that. Or going back to the haunted house, maybe something is scary. So a lot of times in movies, they'll have like this low frequency hum coming in and then that just subconsciously, like you might not even be thinking about that sound when you're listening, but you'll feel it and you're like, oh, something is wrong. Something is scary. Right. Things like that I would consider.
Yeah. I like having a conversation with the director and just figuring out what that world is. So if we're in just a house, you know, where does that house live in this world geographically? Like, is it near a school? Is it near a park? Is it a residential neighborhood? And that'll help inform what's happening outside of that world. And then inside of that world, you know, if you're navigating through the house at all, you can say, oh, there's a refrigerator in the next room. Maybe we hear that compressor a little bit while we're in this room. Or they have a cat. So maybe there's a meow that you can throw in there at some point, or, you know, whatever it is, talk to the director. And if you're doing it yourself, have a conversation with yourself and really think about where are we now in this world that I've created in this project? Really think about it beyond where you are visually. Where can we go sonically that is going to make this, filled out and feel like a real world?
You know, one of the things that we do by practicing for decades doing this stuff is we get into the habit of thinking that way. So we'll slap all kinds of stuff on there without even being told, without even thinking about it. But if you're just starting out, or you're your own sound editor, you're not thinking that way. It's a different mindset. So again, if you're doing it yourself, just put as much imagination into it as you can. Because it's not about the boxes you use, or there was this one film back in the Pleistocene era when I was coming up. They were called The Gods Must Be Crazy, and this is back when you only made films on 35 millimeter, and this was shot in Africa, and it looked like absolute hell, and it sounded like hell, but it was funny and charming, and people loved it. It made $1 bazillion on a no budget. because nobody cares about the technical aspects when they're watching a film. I mean, if you make them watch an out of focus shot for 10 minutes, maybe, but you know, put up an HD monitor, go look at a bunch of old Law and Orders. You know, you think that's, you want to see some out of focus shots? This was an amazingly, you know, they had to do it fast. And when they got the performance, they got the performance. And if it was soft, it was soft. So it's all about the heart, not about any of the boxes or anything anyone does, except the heart that goes in the film and then what you can do for sound to amplify the heart of the film.
Yeah, definitely. I feel the same way about music. We have another question from Kate Fogarty, which is, if you're looking to upgrade from DIY, where might an indie project start to meet competent sound people willing to work with low budget? I guess particularly in this era when networking events in person are not as common.
Yeah, that's tough. With the pandemic happening, there's not a lot of opportunities to just mingle in person. Where, you know, I when I first moved to town, I met people that worked at studios, and they just happened to have friends that worked in the sound industry, and that's, you know, I met my first sound editor and re-recording mixer for that first feature film that way. It's just, you know, and when you meet someone that's working as a professional sound editor, they know re-recording mixers and Foley artists and ADR recordists, and you know, it's easy to meet one person and then just slowly network out and find out who's not working on a show right now and who might have, you know, time available to help out a small project. But yeah, nowadays it's a little tougher these days with the pandemic happening, that the mingle is not a great way to do it. So I'm not sure what resources might be out there that are a great way to expand your team to include post sound.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's just an endless bunch of people out there claiming to be post sound people, and you know, if they're willing to work for nothing or for like to deliver a whole job for $4,000, they aren't going to know what they're doing, because the ugly truth about sound is that it's really much more like the transportation department than it is anything else. Almost nobody in it really would be doing this stuff except to be paid. I mean, we all like it, we all enjoy it, but it's full of underachievers who wanted to be directors and you know, composers and bass players and who ended up doing sound because they needed to make a living. So they have taste, they have talent, they have ears, and they're making it with sound. They're making their money with sound, but they're not dying to do it for nothing. When I do it for nothing, it's out of a personal relationship. That's the only way I do it for nothing. And I think that's the way most people only do it for nothing. And well, a good way to get someone to help you with your film is to make a good film, because I mean, it sounds stupid, but most of the stuff we get that is no budget is really terrible. I mean, there are so many bad films being made. Now, I know everybody loves them, and God bless you. I don't mean to rain on your parade, but they're no good. I'm sorry. You got to learn. It's hard to make a film. People study for years to do it. And so you have a passion, but you may not have any skills, and you may not, you know, but if you do have a passion and a little bit of skills, you might make a little gem. And people will work on a gem for nothing. You know, even if I don't know them, if it's not too long or something, I might help if I have time. I know that there are a few sound facilities that will do things for very, very cheap, if they like them, or if they think the filmmaker has a future. So, you know, whether or not you're going to get someone to help you really is going to depend on how good a film you make. And you got to have belief in your film, so show it. Show them the film.
I'll add to that by saying you should ask. If you think you have a little bit of a film that's, you know, you feel good about its chances out in the world, and you just need help with post sound, it doesn't hurt to ask Technicolor and talk to their their post audio supervisor or manager and just say, hey, I have this film. It's 90 minutes long. What can you guys do to help me out with post sound? It's I know it needs a little bit of help with dialogue. It needs help with this, that. Just it doesn't hurt to ask, and they'll be very honest. They'll be very honest with you.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion, really, because people who do no budget think nobody wants to talk to them, and really they don't, but they will talk to you. And if you can interest them by either having you got a good log line for your film, something will interest them, they'll do it. They'll help you. They may not be able to do it themselves, but then they'll know someone to send you to.
Yeah, so, and those facilities always have apprentices and assistants that are dying to get their hands on a project.
Right.
So, if their A team and their B team is completely booked on features and television shows, their assistants might be like, hey, we can take this on and I'll work my spare time here at the studio, to help these guys out and get the Technicolor name on this thing or whatever the audio facility is. There might be a deal to be made just so that they can start to get the experience and apply the things that they're learning from their engineers and their editors to actual projects.
That's a great suggestion, because not only will they want to do it, all the people who really know what they're doing will be looking in on them and saying, "What, you idiot? Don't do that!" And they'll help you. They'll help them. So you'll get the help of better people. I don't know. I know that like assistants in real sound companies are the most abused and unloved. And if you could call them up, you could call and ask for the assistant and engage them, because first of all, you're the first person that's ever wanted to talk to them, and see if you can engage in a conversation with them. You never know. You might, you might have to do it 10 times to hit somebody, and I'm not going to tell you who to call because they'll never talk to me again. But they're out there, and there's lots of sound companies, and ask for the assistant and beg. You'd be surprised what I find people very forthcoming in the sound business, especially the younger they are. The old guys like me just shut the door. But the young, they have a lot of pity on filmmakers because they know how hard it is. And they want to help. If you respect their craft, they want to help you. Be surprised.
I would also add Facebook groups. I'm on a few Facebook groups, and I ask questions like, "Hey, what do you guys think of this?" For advice, like if I'm having trouble about some kind of equipment or whatever. But there are multiple Facebook groups that you can ask people for help, and you can name a budget even. I mean, they'll laugh at you if you say for free, but most of the time. But there might be a few people who are willing to do it, and then they'll shame the people who are saying, "Give me money." But there's production and post-production sound for. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of it. Production sound for film and video. That's one that I'm on. There's post sound mixers. If you're looking for a student, Hey Audio Student is one. But yeah, Facebook is a great way the groups anyway is a great way to just meet random people who you might want to connect with.
Yeah, and in my experience, also being able to get onto set, which as a post person, obviously is not something we necessarily do all the time in the indie world. But I was lucky enough to work with Jen Page, which I think was the supreme overlord of Blackmagic Collective, who actually is the reason why I know all of you. So it was really because I was on set with her on the first project we did together, the Breakout, a rock opera. Then through working with her on more and more projects, that's how I got introduced to you all. So the value of being on set for me has been tremendous, and hopefully, I still try to seek out opportunities to do that, even if it's doing something like being a PA, because I know it's ultimately going to be valuable to me.
Mm-hmm. That's good suggestion. If you haven't spent a lot of time on a set, as a sound person, it'd be a great thing to do.
Yeah.
But I have a totally off the subject. When you're editing your film, and you're going to be the only editor. If you're not the only editor, you won't have an expensive editor probably. I would urge you not to cut with a bunch of music. I would urge you to cut with as little music as possible. Both because from an artistic point of view, the film has to be better if you're not slathering music on it. Your music covers up all kinds of sins, especially needle drops, songs. And everybody thinks songs are what music is in a film nowadays. But, cut with less music, and whatever you cut with, you're not going to be able to afford. So if you don't have a composer involved already or a band that's going to give you songs, you're going to cut your film, and it'll get all sensitive about it, and it'll get everything perfect to some song, and then the song is gone, and suddenly the scene is gone. So don't use crutches when you're. It isn't really a post question, but the music is a big crutch until the composer gets it, in which case it's supposed to actually add something. But how often do you get, as sound editors, to the extent that we even listen to the music, which we're supposed to at least know what's in it, some of the stuff we get that they have these famous records in them, and down to the mix day, and they say, well, we'll replace it later. Yeah, you'll replace it later, and then suddenly the thing dies. So, that's just a little pet peeve for you.
Yeah, or the director. Yeah, and then the director falls in love with the temp track, but it's something that's too expensive to use in the movie. Like, they put "Sympathy for the Devil" in there or something like that, and now they can't watch the scene without "Sympathy for the Devil." Yeah, no, I've certainly witnessed this myself on the music side.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like music. For God's sake, that really, actually is kind of magic in a way. I mean, I certainly don't know how to do it, but you think about the music you want to put in a record. It's something that hits you. Someone probably spent 6 months making that record. No, not 6 months, but months making a record, and had all the money in the world, and were great world talents. And suddenly you want your struggling composer or struggling songwriter to come up with something that good for no money. How is it going to happen? So.
David and Diana, do you have experience with this happening too, where the director's got this temp music that they're super wedded to, and that becomes a problem?
Yeah, it's it happens at all levels, not just the indie world. I've seen cuts of films before release, like studio cuts of films, and the announcement at the front is there's a couple needle drops in here that aren't final, and it's a month out from release. Like, okay, well, enjoy recutting your scenes when you get the approved music in there, because it's going to feel completely different. So, and then you watch the final version of the film, and it's like, oh, okay. And that can happen for any number of reasons, not just you can't afford it. It could be the artist doesn't want their music in your film. So, it's a tricky thing to walk. I know there's bigger filmmakers that like to think about music right out the front, like James Gunn, for instance, will be like, I'm going to have these songs, and he's fortunate enough to be in a position where artists are like, okay, we know your film's going to get out there and it's going to make $1 billion at the box office, so we're fine licensing these incredible pieces of music to you. But in our the thing with licensing music is that if it's not going to get out there, the artist is less likely to license it to you, and less likely to license it to you for cheap. Because if it's going to get on Netflix, then they're like, okay, at least the amount they're paying is worth it to us, because our song's going to get back out there, and people are going to go to the store and pick up the record, the CD, go to Apple iTunes, and buy the track for 99 cents or whatever it is. That it's exposure for the artist. But when you're sitting in an edit bay and listening to these top 100 songs from the last 30 years, 40 years, it's like mute track and worry about what's happening in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're coming to the end of our time here, but thank you all very much for being with us, and I hope this was helpful. I know that I learned a lot, and I hope you everybody watching did too. And with that, I'll take you all out, and we'll go to our announcements at the end here. Okay. Thank you all for being here.
Been a pleasure.
All right. Well, we do have a winner to announce for our Davinci Resolve seat. And oh yes, I did want to mention that in this Davinci Resolve seat that you will have, there's Fairlight tools that are going to be built in, and that's also in the free version. Hopefully I announced that correctly. But in any event, why don't we get the name of our winner, if I could get that, please. Do we have our Resolve seat person? Ah, yes, it is the Jayasri M. Hart. Congratulations, you've won a seat of Davinci Resolve. And with that, just a couple of reminders. Remember to, if you have a 5 minutes or less short film, to submit that to our Blackmagic Collective Film Festival, where people are going to compete for gear and prizes such as the seat of Davinci Resolve and other impressive software and hardware. Special thanks again to our sponsor, Blackmagic Design. And with that, we're looking forward to seeing you at our next panel. Thanks everyone for being here.